Why is the third quarterback getting interviewed? You got nothing to do with the game. Okay, it's all for media clicks. And he's a heck of a personality, but the personality can't come out until you do something on the field. And it's a big week for Dylan Gabriel and a big week for the Browns. I mean, making that transition for him even be available to the press. I don't know why he's doing it.
You tell me, you know how that works. Is that the front office? Is that the comms team? Like, who's putting him out? So we're saying it's not really on him. We have to protect him. He's a young player.
Yep.
Why are we making him available?
Exactly. To me, I mean, there's no sense to have him.
Tom Brady doesn't throw shade often, but when he does, the entire NFL feels it. One simple comment from the greatest quarterback of all time just flipped the league upside down. During what was supposed to be a harmless interview about quarterback development, Brady leaned forward, paused for a second, and said 9 words that set off a firestorm. There are a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing. He wasn't talking about rookies. He was talking about coaches. Within hours, social media exploded. Fans started connecting the dots, and all arrows pointed to one team, the Cleveland Browns. Because if anyone has turned quarterback development into chaos, it's them. Suddenly, everyone was looking at one name in particular, Shedeur Sanders, the young quarterback thrown into a system so broken even Brady seemed to notice. Brady didn't name names, but he didn't have to.
The local Cleveland media keep going relentless on Shedeur. He entitled, distracted, developing slow, can't learn the playbook, not getting practice reps with the scout team, not getting practice reps at all. But what if I told you? And don't none of that got to do nothing with football. This goes deeper than people realize. If y'all ain't seen the Tom Brady came out on Colin Cowherd, now this is pertaining to the Browns saying they developing quarterback.
His words hit like a warning shot aimed directly at franchises pretending to build players while secretly destroying them from the inside. And when he said it, it was like the mask finally slipped off. Clips flooded Twitter. Analysts replayed his tone, his expression, his choice of words. Was the GOAT accusing the Browns of sabotage? Because if that's what he meant, it wasn't just criticism. It was an indictment. And the more fans looked in, maybe it's bad coaching, hiding behind good excuses. It started as just another Monday segment on The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Brady was relaxed, smiling.
Everybody knows how to develop a quarterback. You're assuming that you're going into a program. I mean, I'm telling you, there's a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing when they're tasked with coaching a quarterback or calling an offense. So are you saying, I mean, just like we'd rank quarterbacks 1 to 32, do you rank offensive coordinators 1 to 32? Do you rank quarterback coaches 1 to 32? Well, what if you have the 32nd ranked coordinator in someone's mind, or the 32nd ranked quarterback coach? How is he getting a level of development that the guy who's first is getting?
Talking about leadership and player development, nothing unusual for a retired legend. But then, out of nowhere, he dropped the line that would dominate every sports feed for the next 48 hours. There are a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing when they're tasked with coaching a quarterback. The studio went quiet. Cowherd blinked. Brady didn't flinch. He wasn't joking. He wasn't exaggerating. He was exposing. For years, fans have believed quarterback success depends solely on talent. But Brady's words challenged that myth entirely. He suggested that half the league doesn't even understand how to properly develop the most important position in football. Within minutes, clips of the interview flooded Twitter. Analysts clipped that single line, posting it next to footage of Cleveland Browns practices, where rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders was standing on the sideline, helmet off, watching instead of playing.
But I'm going to answer this question by saying Shedeur Sanders. And I'm going to tell you why. I think he's being set up to fail. That's right, I'm going to say it. Okay. Here we are on national television, right? There's been 11 practices, if I remember correctly. He's been playing against the third unit. He's fourth on the depth chart. And then suddenly you throw him into the start lineup, and he hasn't had any reps with the first team at all. Think about that. So you just gonna throw him to the wolves like that, huh? I mean, if he had first team snaps in practice, I don't say that.
The implication was clear. Brady wasn't taking a shot at young players. He was calling out the system that keeps breaking them. And suddenly, all signs pointed to Cleveland. In online debates, fans didn't hesitate to connect the dots. "He's talking about the Browns," one tweet read. "He has to be." Others listed the evidence. Sanders barely getting first-team reps, confusing play calling, a rotating task of offensive coordinators. It wasn't development, it was dysfunction disguised as strategy. By the afternoon, Brady exposes the Browns was trending nationwide. Sports radio hosts replayed his quote on loop. Commentators debated whether Brady had just blown the lid off the NFL's biggest secret: that some franchises are sabotaging their own quarterbacks without even realizing it. Brady didn't clarify, and he didn't need to. The damage was already done. The GOAT had spoken. And his silence afterward said even more.
Let's give him a chance. Let's give him a chance with the play calling. You know you have an offensive line that isn't playing that well. So what do? Why not just play the short game so we can get the ball out of his hands very fast to run a competent goddamn offense? Outside of that, Shedeur has to be better in understanding that the offensive line that you're working with right now is not adequate. Why not allow the players that are competing for a job, in this instance, Shedeur Sanders, to finish off the 2 minutes?
Because when the most successful quarterback in history says some coaches have no idea what they're doing, you can't help but wonder who he's really talking about. The moment Brady's interview clip hit social media, it spread like wildfire. Within minutes, NFL Twitter turned into an investigation board, screenshots, slow motion replays, and all. Fans were dissecting every word, every pause, every raised eyebrow from Brady. And just like that, the search for who he meant began. The first suspect, Cleveland. Clips surfaced of Shedeur Sanders standing quietly on the sideline during drills, watching from a distance while third-string players took snaps. Reporters replayed those moments next to Brady's quote, and the parallel was impossible to ignore. Some coaches have no idea what they're doing. Suddenly, that didn't sound like a general statement. It sounded like a direct hit. Reddit threads exploded. Fans listed evidence like detectives building a case. No first-team reps. Confusing playbook rotations. Offensive coordinator fired mid-season. The timeline looked less like a rookie learning curve and more like a setup for failure. Then came the viral tweet that summed it up perfectly. Brady didn't throw a pass, he threw a grenade. ESPN segments replayed his comment over B-roll of Browns practices. Analysts like Louis Riddick and Marcus Spears started weighing in, hinting that Brady might have said the quiet part out loud. The league, they suggested, has a coaching crisis, and Cleveland might just be its poster child. By that evening, hashtags like #BradyExposesBrowns and #FreeShedeur were trending across sports media. Even rival players quietly liked posts that hinted at dysfunction inside the Browns camp. What started as one offhand remark had turned into a full-scale media storm. Not because Brady named names, but because he didn't need to. And as fans connected the dots, one ugly truth began to surface. Maybe Shedeur Sanders wasn't struggling because he was unprepared. Maybe he was unprepared because the people meant to guide him never did. But that was just the beginning, because what happened next inside Cleveland made Brady's words look tame. Behind the highlight reels and polished press conferences, the Cleveland Browns were falling apart from the inside out. What Brady hinted at wasn't a mystery. It was a mirror held up to a franchise that's been pretending to develop for years. while barely holding its playbook together. Inside team facilities, confusion reigned. Players described meetings where one coach preached patience, another demanded urgency, and no one seemed to agree on what the plan even was. Offensive schemes changed week to week. One day it was a short pass attack. The next it was deep shots with a line that couldn't protect. By the time practice ended, everyone was more exhausted by the contradictions than by the drills. For Shedeur Sanders, it was worse. He wasn't just learning a new system, he was surviving one. Most days, he ran plays with the third-string unit, throwing to receivers he'd never see on game day. When the offense struggled, analysts blamed him for not adjusting. But how do you adjust when you've never been given a real chance to build chemistry? How do you lead when you're treated like an intern in your own huddle? Veteran players whispered that the energy felt off. Assistants clashed behind closed doors. Play calling duties shifted without warning, and morale cracked. It wasn't development, it was damage control. The Browns called it a competitive environment. Brady and everyone watching called it chaos. Then came the breaking point. Practice film leaked showing Shedeur being yanked mid-series for a veteran backup after one incomplete pass. Fans saw it as proof. The kid wasn't being coached. He was being tested to fail. Cleveland's leadership called it evaluation. But the rest of the league saw it for what it was. Another young quarterback swallowed by a system too disorganized to protect him. And just when it seemed things couldn't look any worse, the owner opened his mouth and confirmed every suspicion. If fans still had doubts about what was really happening inside the Browns organization, those doubts vanished the moment team owner Jimmy Haslam spoke. It was during a routine media scrum, just a few harmless questions about team progress, coaching, and rookie development. But when a reporter casually asked about Shedeur Sanders' future, Haslam gave an answer that froze the entire room. Honestly, I didn't even know we'd signed him. That was the staff's decision. For a second, no one believed what they'd heard. The man who owned the team, the man responsible for millions in contracts and the direction of an entire franchise, was admitting on camera that he didn't even know who his own rookie quarterback was. The clip spread across social media in minutes. NFL fans replayed it, slowed it down, quoted it, and captioned it with disbelief. "This isn't a rebuild," one fan wrote. "This is chaos in a suit." Others called it the most embarrassing owner moment since the Browns' Factory of Sadness days. And in that instant, everything Brady said suddenly looked prophetic. How can a franchise claim to develop a quarterback when the owner doesn't even know he exists? How can you build a future when your leadership doesn't even know who's in the room? Haslam's comments were more than careless. They were confirmation that Cleveland's dysfunction started from the top. The team tried to spin it later, calling it a miscommunication and delegation of responsibilities. But the timing was brutal. Coming right after Brady's criticism, it didn't sound like leadership. It sounded like denial. Reporters swarmed team insiders searching for answers. Nothing. None came. Coaches avoided the topic. Players stayed quiet. But the silence spoke louder than any statement. For years, fans suspected that the Browns didn't have a development problem. They had a direction problem. Now, thanks to one careless quote, that suspicion had become fact. And before the organization could even catch its breath, the media turned its full attention toward the storm building outside. The fan revolt and the analysts ready to call this what it really was, a setup. The morning after Jimmy Haslam's comment, Cleveland woke up to a full-blown media war. Sports networks weren't talking about stats or standings anymore. They were talking about sabotage. What started as one careless sentence from the owner had evolved into a nationwide conversation about accountability, hypocrisy, and who was really responsible for Shedeur Sanders' downfall. Local Cleveland radio tried damage control. Hosts repeated the same narrative. He's not ready. He's distracted. He needs to learn the system. But fans weren't buying it anymore because at that point, it didn't sound like analysis. It sounded like gaslighting. How could a rookie learn the system when no one in the building seemed to know what the system even was? National outlets pounced. Stephen A. Smith went live on ESPN and didn't hold back. "This isn't development," he shouted. "This is entrapment." You can't expect a kid to succeed when you refuse to give him a chance to breathe. The clip went viral instantly. Millions watched as he pointed straight into the camera and demanded accountability from the Browns organization. Then came Louis Riddick, one of the most respected analysts in football. Calm, measured, and factual, he broke down the data, showing that Sanders had taken fewer first-team reps than any rookie quarterback drafted in the last 5 years. "That's not preparation," Riddick said. "That's isolation." Twitter turned into a courtroom. Clips of Brady's comments played beside Haslam's denial, beside Riddick's breakdown, beside Sanders sitting alone on the bench. The verdict from fans was unanimous. Cleveland set him up to fail. Even rival players joined the chorus, liking tweets and quietly reposting segments that criticized the Browns' coaching staff. The silence from inside the team made it worse. Not one coach defended Sanders. Not one leader stepped forward. By the weekend, one truth had crystallized across the league. Brady hadn't just opened a conversation. He had opened a wound. And for the Browns, that wound was about to start bleeding in public. For Tom Brady, this wasn't just another hot take thrown into the sports cycle. It was personal. Watching Shedeur Sanders stumble through chaos in Cleveland was like watching a distorted reflection of his own early career. The difference? Brady had mentors who believed in development, while Shedeur was stuck in a franchise that only believed in damage control. 2 decades ago, Brady wasn't a superstar. He was a 6th-round pick who barely made the roster. But behind closed doors, he had structure. He had Bill Belichick, a coach obsessed with preparation, repetition, and discipline. He had stability, a real system, and coaches who didn't panic every time something went wrong. Every rep, every meeting, every late-night film session built the foundation that turned a backup into the greatest of all time. Now, look at Cleveland. Shedeur's being tossed between position coaches like a deck of cards. One tells him to trust his instincts. Another tells him to stay in the pocket. Every week, the language changes, the plan shifts, and the blame circles back to him. Brady knows exactly how fragile a young quarterback's confidence can be when there's no leadership above him. That's why his words hit so deep. He wasn't ranting. He was warning. He's seen what happens when talent is wasted in chaos. He's seen young players crushed, not by pressure, but by poor guidance. And in Shedeur, he sees the version of himself that could have been, if not for the right coaches at the right time. When Brady talked about teams that pretend to develop players while actually destroying them, he was speaking from experience. The only difference is he escaped the trap. Shedeur hasn't. And maybe that's why Brady spoke up, not to stir controversy, but to pull back the curtain on a system that chews up young talent and calls it evaluation. Because deep down, he knows something the Browns still don't. You don't build a quarterback through chaos. You bury him there. Brady's comments might have sounded like a jab at one team, but the truth ran deeper than Cleveland. What he really exposed was a league-wide problem, a silent epidemic that's been destroying careers for years. The NFL doesn't have a player development issue. It has a coaching accountability issue. Every offseason, teams flood social media with hype videos about the next great quarterback. Draft day promises, glossy press conferences, smiling general managers. But behind those bright lights lies chaos. Rotating coordinators, ego-driven systems, and young players forced to learn 5 different playbooks in 2 seasons. When they fail, the story is always the same. He wasn't ready. He didn't have the mentality. Never once does anyone ask, was he coached right? That's the double standard Brady was calling out. Quarterbacks are ranked, graded, and cut in public. Coaches? They hide behind excuses. A bad throw is national news. A bad play call is part of the process. And that hypocrisy is costing the league some of its best young talent. Shedeur Sanders just happens to be the latest example of what happens when potential meets incompetence. But he won't be the last, because for every Sanders, there's a dozen others, talented, hungry, and slowly crushed under the weight of poor structure. Brady's words hit a nerve because they came from someone who lived it, someone who survived the system instead of being swallowed by it. His message wasn't bitterness, it was a wake-up call. The league needs fewer slogans about trusting the process and more coaches who actually understand it. Fans started asking a new question online. If Brady had been drafted by Cleveland, would he even be Tom Brady today? And that's when the conversation shifted from one player's struggle to an entire league's blind spot. Because the problem isn't who's under center, it's who's holding the clipboard. By the time the dust settled, it was clear Tom Brady hadn't just started a debate, he'd sparked a reckoning. What began as one offhand remark on a talk show had turned into a full-scale autopsy of how the NFL handles its most valuable position. And Cleveland? They had become the face of everything wrong with player development. The Browns tried to issue statements. They blamed media exaggeration, promised that the process takes time, and doubled down on their commitment to growth. But their words sounded hollow, because no matter how much they spun it, the facts were undeniable. Shedeur Sanders was thrown into a broken system, surrounded by chaos, and left to take the fall for mistakes that weren't his. Brady's message rang louder than any press release. His point was simple. You can't demand excellence from players when the people teaching them are unaccountable. You can't measure a quarterback's progress without measuring the quality of his coaching. And you can't build a future when your foundation is confusion. For years, fans thought bad quarterbacks ruined good teams. But Brady flipped that idea upside down. Maybe it's been the teams ruining the quarterbacks all along. What happened in Cleveland wasn't an isolated failure. It was a reflection of a league that refuses to confront its biggest weakness. The NFL spends millions scouting arm strength, speed, and decision-making. But it ignores the one variable that decides everything: leadership. So when Brady said, "There are a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing," he wasn't being dramatic. He was being honest. And maybe, just maybe, that honesty is what the league needed most. Because if the greatest quarterback of all time is saying the system is broken, it's not criticism, it's a warning. And if teams like the Browns don't start listening, the next Shedeur Sanders won't just fail, he'll disappear before anyone ever sees what he could have become.